Hello, I'm Deborah, and today then we're going to talk about equality in the UK, specifically looking at this from a business viewpoint and in accordance with the Equality Act, which came in 2010, and which has quite a lot to say about how employers can treat their staff and about how businesses should be treating their customers. So equality is about being fair. It doesn't always mean that everyone is treated exactly the same. After all, imagine if you expected me to run up the stairs, or if you expected someone using a wheelchair to go upstairs, that would be unfair to them. So sometimes it can just be putting in different things to help people. Diversity refers to the differences between people. We are obviously all different, and that's a good thing. Discrimination is about treating someone differently because of a specific characteristic that they have or that you think they have. That might be age, it might be sex, it might be all sorts of things, and we'll look at that. Harassment. Now, harassment is any persistent, unwanted contact or behaviour towards somebody. And if they view it as harassment, in the eyes of the law, it is harassment. And that might be sexual harassment, some of you have probably thought of, but it might be all sorts of other things as well. It's not always about that. Prejudice is about having an attitude about a particular group. Quite often, people who are prejudiced start their statements with, well, they're all, all women drivers are bad. I'm not sure if that's prejudice. Abuse is about causing harm, and again, that is a subject that we will look at a different place, but this is when harassment and prejudice turn into actually doing somebody harm, and usually because of how you see them or the group that you think they belong to. Now, the Equality Act, which came in 2010, is intended to make sure that everybody is treated equally. And what it does is it sets out 9 specific characteristics which are quite common ways in which people can be discriminated against. So the Act came in 2010, as I said, and these are the topics that they have included. So age, disability, gender assignment, as in somebody who becomes a different gender from the sex that they were born with. Marriage and civil partnership is talking about people in relationships of all sorts of different kinds. Pregnancy and maternity is about treating pregnant women and expectant fathers equally. Race, I think, stands for itself, religions and beliefs. And remember there as well that it's not just the mainstream religions, but all of them. Sex, do we treat men and women equally? And sexual orientation. Homophobia, unfortunately, does still exist. So looking in more detail then at the first of these 9, age. Have you ever made assumptions about somebody because of how old they are? Have you ever thought perhaps someone is less intelligent because they're much older, or even because they're younger? Do you think that the media present people in a particular way that might not be true of everyone you know in that age group? These are things you can be thinking about. Now, obviously, something students ask about quite a lot is the fact that there are age restrictions for those of you that are much younger. If you're under 18, for example, you can't buy alcohol. Things like cigarettes have age restrictions on them. At your age group, we make you go to school, whereas that doesn't happen to older people. So there are some areas where age discrimination is allowed, if you like. But it does mean that everybody of that age goes through that phase, and it's generally done in order to do good things, like to make sure you have an education and to protect younger people from things that might be seen as dangerous or that they might be ready for. So disability, our chap here's in a wheelchair, but it's really important to remember that not all disabilities are visible. It might be somebody who is deaf or blind, it might be a mental impairment, it could be a lot of things. It's not always obvious at all. And that's why it's really important to make sure that we are making our workplaces, our public venues as accessible as we can, and that we're not making assumptions based on what people look like about whether they have an ability or not. Gender reassignment, this is about people who choose to become a different sex, have operation, etc. There's been some controversy about this. So you can't refuse service, for example, in a woman's clothing shop. They couldn't refuse to serve a woman who used to be a man. Things like all gender restrooms that you see there in the picture as well have come in order to try and put in some more equality for these people. They do have rights, for example, to be called by their chosen name. You know, if you were born as Sarah and you choose to become Brian, you have a right to expect everybody to call you Brian. An employer, for example, who refused to do so would be breaking the law. Marriage and civil partnership. Now, again, there are age restrictions on this. You'll know that you can't get married until you're 16. So it is about adults, but any two consenting adults in the UK are allowed to get married, whether they are male or female, and what the mix is there. Civil partnerships as well, people who choose to live together but not necessarily have that religious or that ceremonial aspect to make it into a marriage, they actually have similar rights. So if one dies, for example, and they want to leave everything to their partner, then they can do so. They won't be excluded from that on the basis of whether or not they have that marriage certificate. And also, of course, in recent years, gay marriage has become equally valid to heterosexual marriage. Women, as you probably know, are entitled to maternity leave. So if you get pregnant as a lady, then you are entitled to time off to have that baby and care for that child. Equally now as well for men, you know, the couple can decide between them if they wish to that the man will take some paternity leave. There are legal requirements as to what that leave should be, and we'll look at that when we look in a bit more detail at HR and the kind of benefits that we have to give to our staff. Things like breastfeeding in public, you know, women do have a right to feed their baby. Assumptions can be made. One of the things that we talk about when we look at interviews is that as a young woman, you should not tolerate being asked by employers whether you're intending to have children. It is actually none of their business.